Alrighty, it is either Wednesday, the 30th, or Thursday, October 1st. So today I want to remind you that last time we took a quiz, and that was for the most dangerous game, which was a longer story. We listened to about 20 to 25 minutes of it in class, and then you were supposed to finish listening to the rest on your own and taking the quiz. Couple of items that we've been talking about are explicit and implicit information and what that meant. Explicit, it's stated straight out. Implicit, you have to figure it out in a story, what the character is like or what the theme is like. We also talked about plot being setting at the beginning, time and place, the rising action, the conflict is in there. It can be an internal conflict or external conflict with an outside force. Climax is the high point where it's really exciting, and then the falling action, and then the ending, which is also called the resolution, conclusion, or denouement. So we talked about plot, we talked about internal, external conflict, and then we talked about explicit and implicit information. And I wanted to look at the weekly reading doc, parts 1 through 3 with you. That is actually due on Friday, October 2nd, this week. So when you are reading your own book, that you have to only do one book report for the term because of hybrid, but book reports and all things for reading are in the independent reading folder. So you should be working on the weekly reading doc. Last Friday, you did part 2, the Friday before part 1, and this Friday part 3. So go into the independent reading folder, and then you find weekly reading doc weeks 1 through 3. So like I said, you were doing one part per Friday, and then it's not graded until this Friday, October 2nd. So you were working through the purple part a couple of Fridays ago, the pink part last Thursday, and then this Friday, so you have all of that from a couple weeks ago, and then you have the pink part from last week for double journal entry. And then this Friday, the KWL chart. So KWL chart means, what do you know about a topic in your book? What do you want to know? And what have you learned so far, either about that topic or at least within your book? So you would write down a topic from your book, then list 3 things you know about the topic, 3 things you want to know, and anything you've learned about the topic. If you haven't learned anything, summarize what's going on in your book under what you have learned area for 3 to 5 sentences. Okay, so once you finish this document, then you submit that on Schoology on or before Friday, October 2nd. Are there any questions on that document? Again, it's in the independent reading folder, and it's called Weekly Reading Doc, weeks 1 through 3. Also, while you're looking at the screen, remember, always look at the blue folder for distance learn days. There's something every time you're home, because it's not days off, it's called distance learning. So always do those. Those are graded, and they are also for attendance. And then you look at the right-hand side on Schoology, and it tells you what's coming up, like today, Tuesday, which is tomorrow is the 30th, we did the most dangerous game and the test. Thursday, October 1st, you'll be working on quote versus paraphrase assignment between Wednesday and Thursday. So it's due in class, whatever day you're here. Friday, October 2nd is Distance Learn Day. Again, join me for Google Meet. The weekly reading doc, parts 1 through 3, and then that's the day I'm going to grade distance learning from 9:21 to 10:1. Okay, I started giving you absences if you didn't do your 28th and 29th assignment for distance learn, or if you don't do 9:30 and 10:1, you're going to have an absence, and those also count as points. So I'm going to add those points up for your first grade. And then Friday, October 9th, that's Grammar Mod 12. All the pre-test lessons and review are due. Then you have the post-test, your October 12th or 13th in class only. And then you have Friday, October 23rd, and so forth, different things coming up. So that's how you know. And again, your blue distance learning folder is up here, and that's graded every couple of weeks for participation. So any questions on Distance Learn Days folder or the Independent Reading folder? Okay, moving back here. I just talked about the weekly reading doc in the Independent Reading folder. So don't forget about that. Don't forget, join me on Fridays. This Friday, that would be October 2nd in Google Meet. And the code for that is D Boyson. So make sure that you join. You're only on for 5 to 8 minutes. It's for attendance and just to connect with you. So please do that. I'm going to do a conflict Quizlet with you, but to review, just a reminder, external conflict. Okay, you have two kinds of conflict, internal and external. And for external, it's character versus character versus nature, character versus society, and sometimes it can even be character versus technology, so online things like technology. Internal conflict is when you struggle with something, or a character struggles with something within themselves. These two contradictory wants, needs, or desires help to build a character. So remember, conflict like this, internal and external, is in fiction, so fake stuff. Nonfiction or informational text, one, doesn't really have a plot, and two, the conflict is much different. So I'd like to move on to this frame, and I want you to think about whether each of these examples is interior or exterior conflict, and if I call on you to be able to explain why. First one, you love going to soccer practice every Friday night. However, last week you had to go to dinner with your family instead, and this week a friend has invited you to the movies. So let's talk about that one for a moment. First of all, it's both interior and exterior. Think about, why is it interior? Okay, and why would it be exterior conflict? All right, the next one. At a party, you spent a lot of time talking to a friend from your math class, just chatting. Now another classmate has spread rumors around school about the two of you. Okay, what kind of conflict is that and why? Interior or exterior? Everybody think about that, and I'm going to call on somebody. And we are going to move on now. I'm going to get out of this frame. I want to move back here, and we'll be doing a little bit of punctuation, YouTube, and I'm going to also talk a little bit about part of the punctuation for Mod 12. So moving back here, I'm going to pause the video, and you're going to do the conflict Quizlet. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to do a little Mod 12 punctuation. So I'm going to show you a little YouTube video with commas and introductory elements. And then I'm going to talk about commas with interruptions, as well as quote versus paraphrase. And we'll be working on an activity with what's the difference between a quote and a paraphrase. So we'll be looking at that in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to show you a YouTube within a YouTube right now. So this is introductory elements.
Hello, grammarians. Paige and I are here to teach you about introductory elements in sentences and how commas relate to them. Paige, how should we define what an introductory element is?
So it's pretty much something that happens at the beginning of a sentence. It can be like a dependent clause or an adverb. But as we will see soon, it is something that is separated off with, of course, a comma.
Because that's what commas do. They are separators. So let's talk about dependent clauses first. Let me just write out a sentence that begins with a dependent clause. When you come in, please take off your shoes. And I've made the difference between the dependent clause and the independent clause pretty clear. So this is, the dependent clause is purple, the independent clause is green. Is there a need for a comma here?
Of course.
Okay. Because we're leading with a dependent clause, and that means that this thing can't stand on its own, right? It's like the ladder up against the tree. Because an independent clause in green can stand on its own, a dependent clause cannot.
Okay, so this is where I had mentioned to you that you have to have a comma because part of it can be by itself. It's independent. Please take off your shoes can be a sentence by itself, but when you come in cannot be by itself. So you have to have a comma in between. And that's also called a complex sentence when one part can be alone and the other part cannot. So we talked a little bit about commas with introductory elements yesterday. Now I'm going to talk about commas with interruptions. So let me click out of that. And thinking about interruptions, okay, so thinking about interruptions, I want to look at this slide with you. So this is also part of the lesson on Grammar 101, okay? So with parenthetical and transition expressions, use commas around parenthetical and transitional expressions, including these kinds of adverbs. Well, I think this can get really tricky if we sit and look at all these big words with skipping some of the Grammar 101, but if you think about if there's like something that kind of interrupts in between, then you have to have commas if you pause there naturally. For example, the contents of this chapter, from what I have seen, are a repetition of the last chapter. So from what I have seen kind of interrupts in the sentence, because you could just say the contents of this chapter are a repetition of the last chapter. So therefore that has to be set aside by commas. If I just said, I will need to see your driver's license, that would be a sentence by itself. But this, however, interrupts. So you have to have commas. For example, I will, however, need to see your driver's license. Because you wouldn't say, I will, however, need to see your driver's license without pausing. Celery, for example, contains fewer calories than what you burn eating and digesting it. So again, this stuff that's set aside by commas could be a part that doesn't have to be there for it to be a sentence. Okay, so those expressions need commas around them. You can also think of direct address. Like if you said, Rashad, are you feeling all right? So at the bottom left of the screen, there it sets somebody's name off. Or if I said, are you, Nicholas, paying attention? Then Nicholas has commas around it. You could also have interrogative tags, meaning interrogative is a question sentence. You did read the book, didn't you? So you kind of pause after that because you wouldn't say, you did read the book, didn't you? Okay, so you have to like pause, so you have to have a comma there. So if I said, you did do your distance learning, comma, didn't you? That's how it's spoken. Or sharp contrasts. So make sure you buy whole milk, not fat-free milk, or the recipe will not work. So it kind of sets it out by putting commas. My father, unlike my mother, loves to watch scary movies. Again, commas around that because it sets it aside to make it a sharp contrast. Most skateboarders, but not all of them, like to take risks. You also pause, okay? And it also doesn't have to be there to have a sentence because you could say most skateboarders like to take risks. So that is part of lesson 8, mod 12. Okay, so if you think of all of that, okay, so that's all your Grammar 101. And reminder that Grammar 101 is due on 10/9, okay? So at this time, we are going to look at what it is of upfront in a magazine, upfront magazine. We're going to look at the difference between paraphrasing and quoting. So I want you to take out your Chromebook. And then you need to go to fiction, nonfiction. Okay, so go to fiction, nonfiction folder because that's the unit we're in besides grammar. And I want you to go to not fiction, not nonfiction, but upfront magazine articles. Okay, so what you're going to work on today is quoting versus paraphrasing. So open up this PDF first. Open up the quote versus paraphrase PDF. Okay, so your document should load. And again, it's fiction, nonfiction folder, then go into the upfront magazine article folder, and then finding the quote versus paraphrase PDF. Okay, that looks like this. Okay, so follow along on your own screen for quote versus paraphrase. When you incorporate information from other sources into your writing, you may choose to quote the material to paraphrase it. A quotation is an exact copy of the words an author or speaker uses. A quotation should be surrounded by quotation marks. You should quote a source when the language is powerful and you want to retain the exact wording. To paraphrase is to put it in your own words, somebody else's words. Something that's paraphrased is not surrounded by quotes. You should paraphrase when you need to summarize a quote's meaning or the exact language isn't critical. When paraphrasing, be sure to rewrite the whole sentence. Don't just swap out a word or two, because that's actually plagiarism. Example of a quote. According to the Library of Congress, quote, Abraham Lincoln was the second speaker on November 19th, 1863 at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg. Lincoln was preceded on the podium by the famed orator Edward Everett, who spoke to the crowd for 2 hours. Lincoln followed with his now immortal Gettysburg Address, period, quote. So that's the exact words from another person. Now, if you were to take those exact words and put them into your own words, that would be called paraphrase. That would be like this. President Abraham Lincoln delivered his now famous Gettysburg Address on November 19, 1863. He spoke to the crowd at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery. Edward Everett, a famous orator, addressed the audience first, delivering a 2-hour speech. Okay, so that is the difference between quote and paraphrase. So I'm going to give you a magazine called the Upfront Magazine, and you're going to think about writing a summary, but you're not going to write it on this document. Okay, so let's click out of that, and I want you to find where you're going to be typing your answers from the magazine. Okay, so what I want you to do is open up where it says quote versus paraphrase assignment. So this is where I'm going to hand you a magazine, and you're going to complete. First of all, I just want you to read the magazine, look around in it, and I want you to pick something that you would like to read, because this is informational. This is nonfiction articles. Okay, so after you read an article, complete the document below. Practice both paraphrasing from the article as well as using quotation. So put your first and last name, the hour that I have you. Put the name of the article that you chose. And of course, put that in quotes, because when you use articles, you put quotes around it. And then you paraphrase, put into your own words a good paragraph what the article was about. Include one direct quotation from the article, and punctuate it correctly. So I'm going to let you choose what you want from the article. and then you're going to be putting your information in here, the name of the article, then paraphrase it. So probably 6 to 8 sentences, and also include one punctuation or one quote that you punctuate correctly directly from the article. Then you'll submit that on Schoology today. Okay, so that is your assignment that we're going to work on right now on this or at this time. The quote versus paraphrase, the assignment for the Upfront magazine. So I'm going to hand the magazines out now. You pick whatever's interesting to you. When you're done, check Schoology for any missing assignments. Okay, so check Schoology for missing assignments. Make sure that you have been keeping up, and then you can either work on Grammar 101 Mod 12 after you're done with your Upfront magazine article. You could work on completing your weekly reading doc, parts 1 through 3, which is due Friday. Or you could just sit and read other parts of the magazine if you're all done with that, or if you would like something different to read besides the novels. So now you're reading informational or nonfiction text today, which usually doesn't have characters. So at this time, I am going to stop my video, hand out the Upfront magazines, and then you will have time to work through that assignment and then anything late, Grammar 101, or your weekly reading doc parts 1 through 3, which are due for Friday.